And what this graph is showing is it's showing treatment plants installed in different parts of Ghana. And so we were very quick at building these plants and putting them in place. But if I click the slide again, what you see is really the number of plants that are actually working. So, what we have done as a sector is that we have been very quick to build infrastructure, particularly in the area of wastewater, but we haven't really designed them in a way that they can be operated and maintained in the countries in which we build them. And I'm sure there are similar experiences in Sri Lanka. Certainly, I know for a fact in India, there are large wastewater treatment works that are completely dysfunctional. Recently, in a World Bank report, for example, they stated that in Indonesia, almost 50% of treatment capacity that was installed in the 90s was not working at all. And so if we were very honest with ourselves, we haven't done very well in terms of this type of infrastructure. We haven't engineered it well for the local context. And the systems have also had very high CapEx and OpEx costs, and of course, very low cost recovery rates. And so they've become dysfunctional over time. When we look at moving forward, I think most people understand that sanitation really needs some sort of disruption. We have to design systems that are more simpler and much more sustainable. So they have to have small footprints. They have to have much lower CapEx and OpEx costs so that they can be financially sustainable moving forward. I think there's also a recognition that sewers and wastewater treatment might not always be the best option, particularly in developing countries. These systems tend to be much higher in terms of their running costs. They have much higher energy and water inputs. And when you're in an environment where water and energy may be unreliable, and also you have very poor operation and maintenance paradigms, then these systems become dysfunctional. The other problem that we have is while sewers and wastewater treatment works have been built but have not functioned particularly well, the systems that we've put in place for on-site sanitation have also not performed particularly well. And from a user's perspective, they are very often not preferred solutions because they're smelly, they're not being desludged very regularly, and so they're not a very attractive option. Now, they may be the attractive option from a sort of cost perspective and in terms of a maintenance perspective, but the way in which we're implementing them now is probably not appropriate. So we have a situation where both the sewers and wastewater treatment solutions aren't particularly great, but also the off-site or the on-site solutions are also not particularly great. So we do need some, innovative thinking in this space to come up with solutions that are going to work. One of the interesting opportunities that we have is that we can learn quite a lot from the mistakes that the West has made. When I look at wastewater technology development in the West, it's been a very sort of cut and miss type approach. They started 50 years ago with very clunky systems, very large concrete infrastructure, which were based primarily on a lot of rules of thumb. And you can almost imagine like the last 30 to 40 years was like one big pilot study in the West where they were really trying to understand how wastewater treatment processes work, and they were trying to optimize them. Have started to develop some innovations, and you can see some of them there at the bottom, things like granular sludge, things like Anamox can be processed. These processes have all brought down the size of these systems. They've improved the energy efficiency of these systems. And now, these innovations have also enabled a very good cost recovery, resource recovery and reuse. So where you can extract things like nutrients and energy from your waste streams and utilize them effectively. So I think in the developing world, we have this opportunity to learn from that process that the West went through, where they had very clunky, quite cumbersome infrastructure, to systems now which have much smaller footprints and are much more efficient. When I look at the sort of things that are driving the water sector, I see two things. The first is around the productive use of water. And this is where the water sector is moving away from this idea that they want to use drinking water for everything, where they are now starting to ask themselves, what is it that I want the water to do for me? And how can I match the quantity and the quality of the water for that intended use? So they're moving away from one quality for everything, but they're moving towards a sort of mixed quality uses. And this idea of creating these different qualities for different intended uses, you see in many places. So on your left-hand side, as you look at the screen, this is the West Basin Initiative in California, in Los Angeles, where they actually produce designer waters. They use different plug-and-play technologies to create different grades of water for different uses. In the bottom right-hand corner, you have an example from Australia, where they are actually viewing the sewer as a water source, and they are extracting from the sewer the sewage, and then they are treating that sewage to supply things like, for example, irrigation water. And the perspective there is that sewerage is a constant supply of water. It's always there because people have to flush their toilets. And so there is a fairly sort of this baseline flow of water that's always there. This is an example from Chennai, where recently we've been doing, Indrajit, someone has their microphone on, so I can hear some background noise. I just wanted to tell you, right?
Sorry, Kala. Can you please mute yourself, because we get some interruptions. Dear ladies and gentlemen, please.
So this is from Chennai, you know, and they recently had a very extreme drought, and they have really started to diversify their water sources, right? And so they're not relying on one source of water, but they are looking at options. Of course, surface water and groundwater is the usual option, but they've invested a fair amount in desal. They have large amounts of wastewater reuse, particularly for their industrial estates. They've invested quite substantially in rainwater harvesting, demand management, but very interestingly, they have quite a lot of mines on the outskirts of the city, quarries, and those quarries were acting as reservoirs. And so during the recent droughts, they started to extract that water and treat it, and then use that for purposes within the city. So this idea of creating a portfolio of solutions to meet your growing demand is also something that is very consistent with this idea of the productive use of water. Now, when we start thinking about the productive use of water and this idea of different grades of water for different uses, we have to view the water cycle as one. And we have to view all water that exists within the water cycle as good water, but it's just water of different grades. So of course you have your traditional water sources, your surface water, your groundwater, which, you know, is treated and it's fairly high quality. Your leakage and your demand management water is high quality drinking water that can free up a lot of resources for you. And then your gray and black water can be used either with or without treatment for various purposes like irrigation. So for example, if I needed more drinking water for a community, the question would be, do I invest in extracting more surface water and groundwater to meet that growing demand? Or do I invest in leakage management and demand management, which could free up that high quality water for that intended use? If I needed water for gardening purposes, then would I automatically go and try to extract more surface water and groundwater to demand? Or could I treat my gray or black water and use it for that purpose? So by viewing the entire water cycle as one, you can try to match your different needs for water for these different flows that exist, and then minimize your overall water footprint. Now, critical to this is really having a systems perspective, right? It's this idea of trying to connect these different flows to the different types of users and match these different grades for these different users. And by doing this, you can do water balancing, both in terms of quantity, but also in terms of contaminant fluxes. And that then allows you to minimize your water footprint. And we've done a lot of work in this respect and applied it both in India, but also in many countries in Africa. The other big change in paradigm, which I'm sure all of you know, is this idea of waste as a resource. And, you know, there are many sort of waste streams that exist within an urban context, but also within the rural-urban interface. And those waste streams can be used very productively for different uses. And it's this combination of different waste streams that are very interesting. So for example, if you wanted to produce substantial amounts of energy, it would be worthwhile considering the combination of wastewater with combined with agro-industrial waste that would maximize your energy production potential. And so where you locate your energy producing machine, would be very much based around where these different resource streams could be harvested. So it's the combination of these different waste streams that are really going to give you value. Not just that, but it's also where within the water cycle that you decide to capture some of this value. So if you're looking at energy, there's been a lot of research where people have tried to look at how they might capture energy through microturbines, both in drinking devices, but also in the sewer networks. Heat recovery is very common in sewer networks. People are able to use heat capturing devices. And then, of course, at the centralized treatment works where you can get biogas production through anaerobic digestion, or now innovations in things like microbial fuel cells. In terms of nutrient recovery, again, you can capture that in different places. You can do it on site. Fecal sludge management allows you to generate nutrients, sort of with on-site sanitation systems, but you can also do it in a centralized sort of treatment works as well. So where you place your recovery options is also very, very important. But there are challenges, right, when you start to do things like resource recovery and reuse. And it's really the context in which you're working your systems. So if you take energy, for example, there are many barriers, okay? So there are market risks associated, for example, with competition from other fuel providers. If you are competing with other fuel providers who are being subsidized, then it's very difficult for you to make a business case. If you do decide to co-digest with, say, municipal solid waste, then you have challenges with the non-segregation of waste, the low tipping fees for waste collection, and then things like non-compliance with regulations. Now, all of these issues might result in inferior quality substrates that affect the productivity of your plant and ultimately affect, the amount of energy that you can generate. And so you have to understand the context in which you're operating and the landscape so that you can see if actually there is a business to be done here. Is it really worth your while to try and capture and generate value from your waste streams? And for this understanding of the business models is key. And again, when I was at EME, we did a lot of work around these business models. And what we found was that many of these resource recovery reuse systems didn't work because people didn't really understand who the customers were for the products that they were generating. They didn't understand what their value proposition was. They didn't understand why a customer would choose to buy fertilizers from them rather than buying it from somebody else. Was it because their fertilizer was cheaper? Was it because their fertilizer was more effective? Was it because their fertilizer was green? And they didn't really understand the effort it required for them to take that value proposition to the customer. So how much infrastructure would have to be created, and what would be the cost of that infrastructure for them to actually take their product to the customer and sell it effectively? And so many of these resource recovery systems work initially because someone is funding it. So there is risk capital. But when these systems are left to their own devices and they have to make money by themselves, they become very problematic. So I think it's very important to recognize some of these issues, particularly as we move forward in WASH, where we're trying to use resource recovery and reuse as a way to finance the operating maintenance cost of our infrastructure. So in the next 20 years, I do think that it's going to be a golden age for WASH. I think a lot is happening, huge amounts of investment, both in wastewater and in non-sewage sanitation. But I think we need to think about how we do things better. There's a recognition that we have to do things closer to the source. Water is quite heavy. So if you move water a long distance, you use it, and then you move it again a long distance and you treat it, and then you want to reuse it again, it's very energy intensive because water is a heavy commodity. So, a lot of people also are going off the grid, both in terms of energy. You hear about people going into solar and this sort of thing. You can see that this is also happening in terms of water. People are trying to adopt much more circular economy approaches, which means their dependency on distributed water coming from a centralized utility is becoming less important. And then, as I said, this idea at the design stage itself of trying to recover some of the value within your waste streams, your energy, your water and nutrients, is again something that's changing the way in which people are thinking. I think one of the key areas is around the financial sustainability. The biggest problem with sanitation is that the cost recovery has been very poor, and so therefore these systems haven't been maintained particularly well, and then ultimately they become dysfunctional. So this idea of recovering value from the waste streams, coupled with understanding the business models that have to be in place to make it work, I think is very, very important. So we do see changes in all of these areas, and this is how we see the future of water and sanitation moving. And the other thing is that anything that you do, people have got to feel very comfortable using it. There's no point developing a system that is not very pleasant to the user. A toilet that makes it very difficult for people to defecate or urinate is not a particularly good solution. So we have to recognize that the end users, their aspiration, they want to have a very clean, a very efficient system that they don't have to do much with, that allows them to enjoy the sort of quality of life that they want. So that is something that we often ignore. So just finally, I wanted to say that, these two concepts of productive use and resource recovery and reuse, it's shifting the thinking within the water sector away from this idea of water treatment systems and wastewater treatment systems to now this idea of a water machine or a water factory, where the machine can take waters of different grades, and you can turn the handle, and then that machine can produce waters of different grades for different users, a bit like the designer waters that I was talking about. You can turn this handle, and this machine can produce energy in the form of either heat or electricity, and you can turn the handle, and this machine can produce other byproducts like nutrients and bioplastics, etc. So people from outside the water sector are starting to develop these types of systems. And where they are locating these systems and how they're designing these systems may not be primarily driven by their thinking around water. They might actually want to have an energy machine, and they see water and its products as sort of feedstock for the machine. So where they locate it and how they design it is really designed around another objective, and water is seen as a byproduct of the whole system. As I said, scale starts to become very important, and as you start doing these clever things, you want to, maintain a relatively small scale. And the work that we have done has shown that populations of around 30 to 50,000 inhabitants is a good scale to do some of these sort of clever resource recovery, reuse type options. The other benefit of these decentralized or distributed systems is that in growing urban areas, as they grow over time, you can sort of incrementally add modules. You're not building a centralized infrastructure, a backbone that serves a large city from the outset, but instead you're adding these decentralized units. So your system grows with the city, and that allows you to follow that growth trajectory in a very accurate way, instead of trying to anticipate growth and then having areas where the capacity was built, but it's not being utilized. And even in areas where you already have centralized infrastructure, so if you look at this sort of pinkish purplish hexagon in the middle, if that's your centralized sewer network, let's say, and on the outskirts, people have been using on-site sanitation, which is, these red dots. The traditional model in most areas, particularly in the colonial countries where the central infrastructure might have been built by the colonialists, what we have done as we have grown is that we have just extended that centralized infrastructure. We've just grown it, right, from the center outwards. So we end up with very large spaghetti type systems. That's certainly the case for our water networks. And with our sewer networks, we find large areas which aren't covered, but we are basically trying to extend that centralized core. The new paradigm is actually to say, forget the centralized core, ring fence that, and treat that as one sort of unit of operation. And then on the outskirts, try to create sort of decentralized units. So you can have a hybrid model. You can have a part of the city that has sort of centralized systems, but another part of the city where you have these decentralized units, which give you a lot more flexibility to do some of these clever things. I always finish with this slide, and people who've heard me talk will know that I always finish with this slide. But as a sector, and I think this is also true for Sri Lanka, we have various options, available to us. We can stay in the sort of business as usual lane, but that's not really an option because, with global change pressures that are taking place, particularly in relation to climate change, but also I think much more importantly, urbanization and population growth, there is going to be a supply-demand deficit in terms of water. So we can't keep building the same systems we've been building, which is really based around 19th century ideas. What we are currently doing is we're in the middle lane. We're trying to optimize these bad systems that we've built. We're trying to get as much as we can out of them. We're trying to improve them. But the scope that they have is very limited. The margins there are not very large. I think for developing countries, there is this opportunity, particularly in the area of wastewater and sanitation, where there isn't much infrastructure currently in place, for us to do something very different. And we can really start from the outset looking at, what is it we want the water to do for us? So can we have different grades of water for different uses? How can we design the system from the outset so we can combine, municipal solid waste with wastewater, with agro-industrial waste to produce energy? How can we ensure that some of the treated wastewater and the nutrient-rich products that we create can be used in the rural-urban interface to support agricultural production? So all of those thoughts tell us and influence where we might place our machines and our treatment systems so that we can have, in the long term, a very cost-effective and sustainable system. That concludes my presentation. Thanks very much. Indrajit, I'll hand back to you. Yeah.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor. It's very descriptive and it's very interesting presentation. It was very insightful and we got lots of new stuff from the presentation. So thank you very much, Professor Kala. So as the next item of our program, I would like to move to the panel discussion, and let me describe how the panel discussion will go. Let's say each panelist, there will be 5 panelists and the moderator, and each panelist will have 12 to 15 minutes for the presentation, and the Q&A session will be at the end of all presentations, at the end of the presentation. So during that, you can type your valuable questions in the chat box in your right-hand corner, and then you can direct those questions to the panelists, and we can discuss them during the Q&A session. So let me start the session. So before that, one request. It would be really appreciated if you all can mute your microphone so we can reduce the interruptions for the session. So let me introduce our first panelist, the first speaker of the session, Engineer Anand Jayavira. Engineer Anand is a water, environmental and sanitation specialist who was graduated from the University of Sri Lanka, Atubadda campus in 1976, and he is a holder of a postgraduate diploma from the IHE Delft, Netherlands. He served in many agencies before retiring from the UNICEF in 2009. He served in the interim National Water Resources Authority from 1996 to 2005 and contributed in formulating the National Water Resources Policy and draft water law for Sri Lanka. He has many international publications to his credit. So currently he is serving as a National WASH Advisor for many agencies. So I would like to hand over to Engineer Anand for your.
Good evening, everyone. Let us start the presentation. My topic is status of access to WASH, challenges and opportunities in the Sri Lankan context. Now, key aspects of my presentation, WASH, I think I address. We are reaching the global community, and there are, I think, still laymen listening to us. WASH is water, sanitation, and hygiene. Please know the colors that we use. These are the colors for the 3 key aspects of WASH: water, sanitation, and hygiene. Drinking water is, we need to ensure safety and security of drinking water. In sanitation, definition of sanitation is using a toilet safe disposal of excreta, and hand washing with soap. So we cover wash with these benchmarks. And my presentation will cover sector performance, performance monitoring, and challenges. Yeah, now I just want to cover the monitoring system that we have adopted in Sri Lanka. Sector monitoring is, I think, mainly done through national census that is conducted every 10 years. Now the next one is in 2021. So our baseline was developed on the basis of the 2012 census. Then we have MDG targets up to 2. We reported MDG achievements. Then now we have mainstream SDG 6 in the water sector, especially we have formulated plans to achieve 6.1 to 6.6. Then we respond to UN Water, FAO, UNEP, and joint monitoring program of UNICEF, WHO, GLAS of WHO. The cycle is in 2 years. Every 2 years, we are prepared to report. Then household income and expenditure survey conducted by the Department of Census and Statistics. Demographic health survey conducted nationally. And the National Water Supply and Drainage Board is monitoring the key performance indicators. Then there are ADB, World Bank, JICA. They do sector reviews and to formulate projects. Central Bank annual report as well. So Sri Lanka benchmark for drinking water is based on 6.1, and for sanitation it is based on 6.2 SDG targets. So achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all by 2030 through provision of safely managed drinking water. Now we are aiming at providing safely managed, subjected to water quality surveillance and water safety plans. I think those are instruments, regulatory instruments that we have adopted in the water sector to ensure that water is safe to the public, and also it helps to assess the risk of contamination and depletion of water resources. That is implemented by all service providers, including we are trying to introduce this to protected wells at household level, then rainwater housing and tube wells. Sanitation, achieve universal access to safely managed sanitation for all by 2030 through environmentally safe disposal of excreta by on-site or off-site facilities, including facilities for hand washing with soap. In fact, I fully agree with Professor Kala that we haven't found a sustainable solution for sanitation. So our slogan is 3S, find for practitioners, a challenge to practitioners to find a sustainable sanitation solution. So this is how we reported to MDG. I think I don't need to go through each and every. So we have achieved water, that is accessibility of drinking water. We have achieved MDG targets. Now this is the big picture of the current situation. It is in fact the baseline. This is how our realization of improved systems, from surface water to pipe water, and in sanitation, open defecation to improved sanitation. I think we have reduced open defecation, I think almost less than 1.5%. It stands at 1.4. So the indicators that we use to monitor the drinking water service levels, we have 13 sets of indicators, proxy indicators. From this population coverage, we derive the Sustainable Development Goal targets. So this is how it, so 1 to 13, and now we have introduced the indicators for safely managed water in the next census. I don't need to go through, but I will share all these information so that everybody will find it interesting. So this is how the national water supply and drainage progressing towards their coverage of pipe water, and how they have increased the water connections annually. Annually, they have an average of 120,000 households connected to new water supplies. So key facts on pipe water supply are 90% of the new connections are household. Up to date, there are about 2.2 million household connections are maintained by NWSDB. Altogether, there are 2.4 million, including the commercial and institutional. NWSDB operates 340 water supply schemes. And then NWSDB had about 120 new water connections per year. 70% of the NWSDB's revenue is from domestic consumption. That is to serve about 8.8 million people. Rural sector pipe water is available for approximately 10% through approximately 4,600 small water supply schemes operated by community-based organizations and local authorities. So these are issues affecting sustainability of various water service categories. Now, you know, the pipe water, the main challenge is to find water resources, because in the wake of climate change, water resources is depleting. Depletion of water resources, competing uses of water, seasonal variation in the river flows, salinity intrusion, and cost of restoration and rehabilitation. I think likewise, there are a lot of issues for various categories. So I don't need to go through each and every, because within that limited time, I'll try to. On the sanitation sector, we have about 5.3 million households now. This is based on the 2012 census. Pipe sewerage is available for around 110,000 people, and on-site sanitation is used by 4.6 million households. So this is how the current situation with regards to sanitation coverage. So now when we introduce SDGs, we, I think, assign various targets to the sector partners. So you know that sanitation, there are multiple partners. Sanitation is everybody's business. So, but there are the means of reporting is percentage of population with access to safely managed sanitation. In wastewater, that is 6.3, target 6.3, there are number of agencies, and means of reporting is percentage of treated water, restored treated water discharged to the environment, and restored water bodies. Drinking water is percentage of population served with safely managed. Hygiene is, in fact, we are very much in line with the hand washing facilities, because after the COVID, all the institutions have installed foot operated hand washing systems. So we haven't actually done a national survey so far, but in the next census, it will be reported. So wash financing is by the Ministry of Water Supply. That is, national budget is channeled through the Ministry of Water Supply. So likewise, we have school sanitation, drinking water regulator is the Ministry of Health, Our Ministry of Health has already established what are called the surveillance system, risk assessment, and advised the service providers. So let us see how we are trying to achieve safely managed drinking water services that is available when needed and sorry about that. Now we actually established a baseline in 2016. Now we consider protected wells as safely managed at the time being, because we haven't done the survey yet. So next year, once the survey is, national census is conducted, we can update these figures. So basic service, limited service, and unimproved no service is surface water. Now still there is a small fraction of population still using. They are actually living in hard to reach areas. So there are plans to provide water through bowsers to these people. In the sanitation sector, safely managed sanitation is defined as use of an improved sanitation facility which is not shared with others, and excreta safely disposed on-site or transported and treated off-site. So we just use this figure of MDG that represent the 87% of the population represent connected to sewers, connected to septic tanks, treated in a septic treatment plants. This figure will be revised after the national census. So basic sanitation, that is flush toilet with soakage pits. Limited is shared toilets, and unimproved pit latrines, bucket latrines. I think we have eradicated bucket latrines in the 80s. So open defecation still we have to deal with about 1.4%. So by 2030, achieve universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water. I think now the government has a more ambitious target to achieve universal access to water in 2025. I think the time, yes, now this is the script of the water. Now this is a big picture. Now we are dealing with 2 Qs and 2 Ss: quality, quantity, and safety and security. So this is the challenge that we are facing. So challenges in achieving goals and targets. Water is a diminishing resource, which is a limited resource. Value of water is reducing, cost of water is rising. Now this statement is very complex. I think we need a very elaborate discussion on this. Value of water is reducing, cost of water is rising. Water is the first casualty of climate change. 24/7 water supply is a reality or fantasy? That is a question, big question. I don't think in time to come you can achieve 24/7 water supply. Then accessibility, availability, and quality we need to achieve. Charging real cost of water and full cost recovery is one of the biggest challenges. Then political economy of water. How do we convince the politician the kind of political economy that we need to progress? Water, the 3 main aspects of progress is water, financial resources, and time to achieve national and global goals. I think my last slide is to inspire the audience. I think water and environment are 2 natural laws. We have not written part of it. I think we are still trying to invent what is water law, what is environmental law. It is like the law of gravity. So do not violate laws of nature and expect H half O, not H2O. Thank you very much. I'll be ready to answer any questions at the final discussion. Thank you.
Okay. So thank you very much, Mr. Ananda Javiras, for your presentation and the speech. So next presenter, I would like to introduce Ms. Kusum Asuporala. Kusum, she is serving as the chair of the network of women water professionals and a regional council member of the Global Water Partnership of South Asia. Prior to these appointments, she was the chair of the Sri Lanka Water Partnership, and she served as an assistant lecturer at University of Peradeniya. Ms. Kusum obtained her BA from University of Caledonia and Masters from Imperial College London in Managing Rural Change. She is a skilled development professional who is nationally and internationally recognized for her research and advocacy work in water. She was also the recipient of the International Water Association International Women in Water Award in 2012. So, Ms. Kusum, I would like to invite you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. I hope you don't hear the music next door because it's very loud and there's nothing I can do about it. Okay. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I have to say that I'm not coming in with a presentation because I'm sort of falling off one Zoom into the other. But I would like to pick up with a few points that I have encountered in working with water and sanitation, especially in schools and communities. So my take is from a social community angle. And I would like to start off by saying that, you know, once when I started going to schools, it was like going to an archaeological dig. I found toilets in various states of devastation. So, you know, you had different kinds of toilets which were broken, but apparently that there was no way that these toilets could be removed without the permission of the Education Ministry. So you had this situation where you are giving toilets, you're building toilets, but you're not maintaining it. Therefore, it falls into this state of disrepair. But I started thinking, now all these toilets have been counted in our national surveys. So are we then underrepresenting the damage, the situation? This is a question that I would like to, you know, maybe all of you to reflect on. The same question came to me because I was at one point doing a photo shoot for the Water Supply and Sanitation, a collaborative council for Sakosan. We were looking for pit toilets, and in a particular area, which I would not like to name here because it would be embarrassing for the people there in that particular elected authority. I was told very clearly by the authorities, there are no pit toilets in our area. Within 2 days, I found 15 pit toilets. Then again, we have to reflect and revisit our numbers. Is this really something that, you know, that our achievements are so great? Or is it that we need to maybe go back and revisit these activities that we are supposed to have done, all these projects that we have done? And that again comes back to me in a bit of it was a bit of a humorous situation, because in the 1990s, when we had the Harispattu water supply project, the engineers actually threw a party. They called it the 1,000 toilet party. Now the 1,000 toilet party again, how many of these 1,000 toilets were working and how many were just structures? So for me, a toilet sanitation is not provision of hardware, but it is the provision of a usable toilet and a community which values it and knows how to use it in the most optimum way. So I really like Kala's point about the Ghana systems, where, you know, you go back in another 5 years and you find that, you know, hardly any of these systems are working. Because I feel that, you know, we are not putting enough energy and enthusiasm into maintenance or even recording the levels of maintenance. Even the investment that we make in our national budgets or school budgets for maintaining sanitation systems. I've worked in a lot of schools, and in almost every one of them have this situation of saying we have a very small budget for maintaining the toilets. After Corona, after COVID, I had school principals who worked with us calling me and saying, you know, we have been asked to provide one tap per 50 children. What do we do? Because we have neither the money, nor even if we have the money to put up the system, we don't have the water. So I think that day after day, we are forced to revise what we think is the optimum system, and seeing whether we have the wherewithal to match the needs with our investment. Another issue that I would like to raise is that evidence-based advocacy. Now, sanitation has cultural connotations. Though we usually go into sanitation from a technical perspective, throughout the globe, it has cultural connotations. You know, it's a very private matter. And when you deal with, you know, sanitation, menstrual hygiene management, there are issues which, you know, people don't talk about very openly. So I think that one of the positives that I can reflect in the work that I did is when we had a situation in Central Province, and the Chief Minister of the Central Province wanted us to do something about sanitation. You know, before we did this something, what we did was, through Sri Lanka Water Partnership, we did an entire survey of school sanitation in Central Province. We did the same thing in Mathura, and we found out, and we could raise issues that people didn't want to talk about. Maybe it is embarrassing. In one place, I found a school in a very marginalized, a very, very poor school, where the community were from a marginalized social group. And the teacher said, well, it doesn't matter, you know, they don't have it at home, so it doesn't matter. When they come here, they can go to the neighbors. So, you know, this aspect of, I mean, what we think is an extremely important activity, you know, having a clean toilet, for that community did not, it wasn't there, because they felt that the community is already marginalized. They have got used to living with their marginalization. So there's no need to provide special attention or special facilities for them at school. Another issue that I do work quite a bit is estate sanitation, you know, in estates. Now, there's been a lot done in the estate sanitation in the last 20 years. There's been a lot of progress. But sometimes we do encounter pockets of deprivation. Now, in Kottapola, Deniyaya, we did a transect walk in a particular area, and we found that right on top, the upstream was well looked after, because they had a estate manager who was very aware of this issue. He was very sensitive to the issue, especially the issue of women and young girls. Then we hit a middle area where there were private estates, and there the norm was something like, you know, 20 families, one toilet. Then again, we go down below, and we have a situation where, again, fairly good sanitation facilities were made available. Now, in that area, obviously, the upstream may be okay. The midstream obviously has to have open defecation. So the pollutants go down. So however good you are doing the third layer, the third tier, you have problems because of fecal pollution. Another issue that which I think I'm happy that I'm not seeing very much is that in the earliest we had estate sanitation, we found that it was used for different purposes, other purposes, you know, goats and firewood and, you know, bags. And in one place, I believe one of my colleagues from Peradeniya found it had been turned into a little religious establishment. But now, most of the estate schools and estate communities want to have good sanitation. And here the driver has been the fact that the young people in estate communities very often work in the urban, formal and informal sector. So they go back to their community wanting the facilities. They don't want to go to the jungle any longer. They want the facilities. So that has been a driver of change. And there is more and more a demand, and sometimes the demand is being met by people. In some places, the demand is not being met because of the issue of private ownership. I have found that in some places in private estates, they would not allow the estate worker to build his or her own toilet because that can be construed as a measure of ownership. Yeah, and I think that I would like to sort of close this by saying that I do believe I am really happy about this saying that Ananda said, you know, water is the first casualty of climate change. But this one word that we have to add to our discussions, and perhaps the most important discussion, is catchment conservation. If you do not look after your catchments, you are not going to have water anywhere. And I think that is the priority in this era of climate change. Look after your catchments. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kusum. It was really interesting. So the next panelist, I would like to introduce Dr. Shiromi Karunaratna. Dr. Shiromi is serving as a senior lecturer in the Department of Civil Engineering, Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology. Shiromi obtained her Bachelor Engineering degree from University of Moratuwa, Sri Lanka, with a first-class honors. And she obtained a Master of Engineering and PhD from Saitama University, Japan. So she served as a postdoctoral research fellow in Saitama University, Japan for 2 years, and a senior lecturer in University of Moratuwa, Department of Earth Resources Engineering for 12 years, and she served as the head of the Department of Earth Resources Engineering in University of Moratuwa. So she published extensively in indexed journals, conferences. She's a chartered engineer, and she currently serves as the president of SLAS, Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, Section C president. So I would like to invite Dr. Shiromi for your presentation. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the kind introduction. Let me thank IWA for inviting me for this forum today. Let me start sharing my presentation. I hope you are able to see the presentation properly.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Right. The topic entrusted on me is inclusive sanitation in Sri Lanka. Right. I will be taking you through the inclusive sanitation concepts, and I'll be very specific, and I'll be going through the following content. Let us briefly look at the definition of inclusive sanitation, even though we have been listening to sanitation aspects and so on from the first two panelists. Inclusive sanitation has been defined as the aspects such as safe management of human waste along the whole sanitation service chain, effective resource recovery and reuse, embracing a diversity of technological solutions, while including the needs of all the stakeholders, such as children and differently able community, girls, females, and addressing all the hygienic needs, as well as elderly population in the society. So in this definition, you would see the emphasis on environmental sustainability as well as social sustainability is included. Right. Next, we will very briefly look at the national policies, what we are having today in the country. Initially, we were starting with the National Policy for Rural Water Supply and Sanitation, which was put forward in 2001, but this was applicable for only rural areas. Right. In this policy, sanitation is considered as a personal matter that requires the commitment of each individual as well as the community. The policy endorsed the simple technologies management and at household level and community level to be developed as cost-effective means of and encouraging improved sanitation. Then in 2017, the National Policy on Sanitation by the Ministry of Water Supply and Drainage Board was put forward, and the policy has all the desirable attributes of a sound policy document, which is a commendable feature. This adopts the holistic approach to sanitation. If you look at the scope of the policy, you would see the policy has building on what is existing and covers all the sectors such as urban, rural, estate, as well as all the stakeholders. And if you look at this policy a little bit further, under the technological option section, they have discussed mainly for the focus on sewage management and ensuring environmental sustainability. However, mentioning of upstream features are needed and to ensure the social sustainability. So a few of the points I am trying to highlight in this policy as well. And under the legal framework, however, it covers the provision of standards and guidelines in a broader sense. Yeah. And also, the sector partners have been identified adequately to ensure the financial viability as well as the implementation effectiveness. And most importantly, although the national policies are sound, Sri Lanka has encountered challenges in bringing its overall policy environment to a level that is generally accepted. And it has paid attention to research and development, and especially mainly focusing to overcome the main constraints achieving the national sector goals. Let's see where we stand. Do we have gaps? According to World Health Organization and United Nations International Child Education Fund, while sanitation coverage in Sri Lanka is one of the best in South Asia, however, it needs to improve rural school sanitation, facilities for the disabled, and the problem of groundwater contamination resulting from on-site sanitation in congested townships. So that is a very valid statement. When you look at some of these statistics, you can see it says all our services are in the basic service level, and also we still have no service areas where which belongs to open defecation. And I think now we have the challenge of going up from basic service to safely manage, and also to totally eliminate the lowest level, that is the no service area. And we need to agree, while policies are essential, and the lack of standards and guidelines leave too much to assume. And policies can mean well, but when the standards and guidelines are missing, it can lead to non-compliance as well as very high variability in the hardware facilities. The policy says in here, you can see, provide adequate hand washing facilities, but this is the reality, what we saw when we were going around. You can see they all wash hands, but in different ways. Right. Now, these slides, the next two slides, give you a summary of the standards and guidelines on sanitation in different sectors in Sri Lanka. And let us see how helpful they are when it comes to implementation. Now we have the specific regulations covering schools and private dwelling units, buildings in urban areas. When it comes to the coverage, most of them can be kind of not much help, and maybe not really there at the level we need, and so on. But there are really good standards and guidelines, such as even the coastal areas where private dwelling units are addressed during the tsunami, and also the on-site sanitation SLS standard covers really good coverage. But again, we can have more awareness and capacity building in these areas as well. Now, if you look at the Act 2016, 2006 Act of 28, 1996, which covers the disabled people in all public areas and buildings, places, and so on. It's really comprehensive document, but this also could be supported with more awareness as well as capacity building. Let's see the challenges faced by the communities in different social, cultural, and geographical setups, and which can be identified in the following manner in 5 sectors, such as we can talk about domestic sanitation in urban areas, domestic sanitation in rural, and sanitation in schools, sanitation in workplaces, sanitation in public areas. For your information, let's look at one of the most important sectors, that is schools, with some statistics. Let's see how we are doing in, for example, this shows some of the statistics in 5 schools in 5 districts. Most of these imply and they all comply with the given school standards, which is 1 toilet. I have taken this all together without considering the toilets and urinals for the convenience, right? When it comes to the statistics or the given standards, it covers a minimum of 1 toilet for 100 students. But can we be happy? At this rate, if you take only 20 to 25% of a class around having 50 students will be able to use a toilet. So I leave it up to you to rethink. Right. Now, it could be seen that irrespective of the prevailing policies and standards and guidelines on sanitation covering urban and rural coastal areas, Sri Lanka still has not been able to achieve satisfactory levels of sustainable sanitation all across the sectors. I see this as lack of readily implementable and cost-effective sanitation solutions suitable for different sectors and communities. Now, as a result, we can identify key areas that can be incorporated in inclusive sanitation models for Sri Lanka. Now, I have put here 6 areas, 6 key areas, such as we can start with establishing sanitation standards in general, then developing minimum standards of hardware facilities and minimum standards for hardware facilities for different sectors, and operation and maintenance guidance, that is very important, as very correctly Ms. Kusum mentioned, and recommended technology options, which is very important for safe management of sanitation, considering the difficulties faced by all sectors and different localities, and also guidelines for safe management of sanitation plans. And also, I have put forward here the like set of principles, in fact 9 principles, which can on which we can work towards achieving inclusive sanitation facilities in Sri Lanka. Now, I could pick few of those. The facilities should be encouraging and encourage hygienic behavior and have appropriate dimensions, especially with different like children and differently able people and so on, and offer enough capacity, especially in crowded places, schools and other institutions, with minimum waiting time, and the use of appropriate locations, address the gender related needs and so on. And of course, they should stimulate learning and development, especially in schools and preschools environment. And projects are designed with involvement of all the stakeholders, so that you can make sure the sustainability of such projects, rather than just starting and then just forgetting about it. Look for low-cost solutions as a developing country, so that we can include all the stakeholders in these plans and protecting the environment. I would like to draw your attention to some of the standards and guidelines that has been already developed with the help of Plan Sri Lanka, National Water Supply and Drainage Board, and Children's Secretariat. I was also involved in developing these standards and guidelines, and we did not stop at developing standards, but we were able to develop training manual, and also did capacity building with the ECCD officers as well as the teachers. This was specially developed as the minimum guidelines and standards for water and sanitation for preschools in Sri Lanka. And we were able to develop detailed plans, guidelines for developing as well as maintaining. And these are the considerations we were able to incorporate. Especially, we found that the ergonomics in the Sri Lankan children are a bit of different to that of the other countries, and therefore it should be considered or taken in these considerations. And other factors such as safety, hygiene, perceptions, maintenance, and overall sustainability, etc., were included. And I would like to show this as the last slide. All the other sectors that I have mentioned earlier need such detailed attention. You can see this is one of the stations in Tokyo, Japan, in an expressway. All the inclusive sanitation considerations in hardware as well as other elements were could be seen, and in Sri Lanka for future, our future expectation would be to achieve these standards. And with this, I conclude my presentation, and thank you very much for your attention.
Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Shirami. It was very interesting and very informative. So thank you so much again. So I would like to invite our next panelist, Engineer Danesh Gunatilaka. Mr. Danesh is a chartered civil engineer, currently working as the Deputy General Manager, Sewerage Section of the National Water Supply and Drainage Board. So he has the experience in engineering with 27 years in the field of water sewerage designs at National Water Supply and Drainage Board, Sri Lanka. So his experience covers planning and design, construction supervision, and operation and maintenance of water and wastewater projects implemented in Sri Lanka and Seychelles. He obtained his master's in sanitary engineering from UNESCO IHE Delft. He has postgraduate diploma in structural design, environmental engineering, and management. So he is international professional engineer and a fellow member of IESL and member of Chartered Institute of Water and Environmental Management. So I would like to invite Engineer Danesh for your presentation.
I'm going to present basically 3 areas in my presentation. So some of the strategies that we have adopted in National Water Supply and Drainage Board. The first one will be the NWSDB strategy to reach safe sanitation coverage for the cities. So in Sri Lanka, at the moment, as at 2019, we have safe sanitation coverage from on-site sanitation is around 87.4%, which is compared to the public sewer system, it's mere 2.1%. So now Sri Lanka is moving from low income country to medium income country. So therefore, to meet the safe sanitation coverage, what we think is we should proceed with 4 areas. That is, first one is on-site sanitation systems. So we should do on-site sanitation in compliance to the Sri Lanka Code of Practice, SLS 745 Part 2, 2009, where we can design and construct septic tank and associated effluent disposal systems and further treatment options of upflow anaerobic filters and so on. So that is on-site sanitation. So when we have on-site sanitation, then it is necessary for us to do the septage management, because the septic tank needs to be desludged once in a year or once in 5 years, depending on the design. So therefore, septage management should addressed in each city of the country, along with on-site sanitation. Then we can't implement a centralized collection system, treatment and disposal for the entire city. That is need a massive investment. So therefore, what we should concentrate on centralized collection treatment only for the densely populated city area where land is scarcely available. That is our approach for the city, for the centralized. And there are, in a city, there are high density population pockets. For example, housing scheme. So then that has to be managed with a decentralized system. So therefore, when we are covering a city, we should blend this on-site septage management, decentralized and centralized, in order to optimize the investment on sanitation. So that is what we are right now doing, and the donors, especially the World Bank, is also of the view of that, because the World Bank, they are considering city inclusive sanitation. So it's more or less like similar to this one. Then on-site sanitation systems, basically septic tank and further treatment options like anaerobic filters are available in the SLS 745, and further treatment options are there. Under the Global Partnership on Output-Based Project implemented with the World Bank assistance, we developed for the low-income areas the precast unit having a septic tank and upflow anaerobic filter. In the lower pictures you will see, and the soakage pits using precast units. So these units can even serve the high water table areas, because the organic removal of is taking place with septic tank and the upflow anaerobic filter. So therefore, that will create minimum impact to the environment. Then in case of decentralized systems, one example is Ratmalana Tsunami Housing Scheme, where 324 housing units have been constructed. So there the investor for the housing has included septic tanks for two of the 4-storied buildings, and then NWSDP has constructed the sewer network and lifting station, a pumping station, and then upflow anaerobic filter and subsurface constructed wetland, and the treated effluent will be chlorinated before discharging to the canal leading to the Lunava Lagoon. So this is one of the decentralized options that we have constructed and operated and maintained by the water board. The next of that example that we have done is Adams Peak, where there are toilet blocks in the upper area. So we have constructed a sewer network. Probably this is the first of its kind, because it doesn't have conventional sewer network because of the profile of the area. And finally, we have the at the lower location, we have the septic tank, anaerobic filter combined, and polish with subsurface constructed wetland. So that is two models that we have developed for the decentralized options. So soon after the tsunami outbreak in 2004 December, we had an opportunity of designing a septage management system for the camps, and later again emergency sanitation for the manic form for the internally displaced person. So there we have constructed pond systems comprising of anaerobic pond, facultative pond, and maturation pond. Actually, this paved the way for the septage management in Sri Lanka. So, so right now we have constructed constructed and start operation of 2 septage plant under the World Bank assisted WASIP project in Mullaitivu and Kilinochchi. Here you can see some pictures of the 2 septage treatment plants that has started operation, and we are building 5 more under the WASIP project. So this is really necessary for each district in order to address the on-site sanitation issues of the country. And under the WASIP project, we had another challenge, because these conventional pond systems require large extent of land. So, so there we can't have this much of land everywhere. So therefore, we had to develop some strategy to manage the septage in a small area. So therefore, we have built a model for that one, having only considering the anaerobic pond as the initial treatment, especially septage contain a lot of sand and other material, inert material. So to separate them, and the treated or the supernatant of the anaerobic filter undergoes activated sludge extended duration treatment, and we are building sludge drying beds because to remove the accumulated inert material in the anaerobic pond as well as excess activated sludge, and then this water finally, after clarification, will undergo chlorination and pump it for reuse, because these plants are almost close location to the composting yards, so they need the water. So this first of this model will be under construction in Thalawakale. So that is about how we manage the city sewerage system, how to manage the city with the 4 options. So the second point that I'm going to discuss is about NWSDB strategy for wastewater treatment. So under 1, you can see the pond systems. First, we consider the preference of pond systems because it is operation cost is least in the pond systems. The operation is entirely natural. The second one, when we have moderate land availability, we go for the second option, that is flow through aerated lagoons with maturation ponds. And the third option is when we don't have adequate land, we go for activated sludge extended duration. And if the discharge location is sensitive, we go for nutrient removal. So that is the 3 treatment options that we are considering. And for models of each units, you can see this is the Hikkadu waste stabilization pond system. So there in the pond system, there is an inherent property of the facultative pond. There will be a lot of algae in the treated effluent from the facultative pond that will actually reduce the pathogen destruction in the maturation pond, and also it will introduce the algae to the environment. So in order to remove the nutrients and the algae, we can construct, we can have floating wetlands by Iconia grass species. And you can see on the left, right hand side, once you have the floating wetland, the treated effluent will have very little algae that goes to the environment with the effluent. So the second option is the aerated lagoons. We have constructed in Katharagama Sacred City. Here you can see the aerated lagoons and finally the maturation ponds with the floating wetland. And what NWSDB has done is for the maturation pond, in order to separate the bacteria flocks from the aerated lagoon, we have deepened area in the maturation pond, created 3 sludge pockets and also a downflow baffle there. You can see downflow baffles there, and individually these sludge pockets can be, sludge can be removed through progressive cavity pumps to sludge drying beds. This is very much similar to the technology that we adopt in the water treatment plants, having plate settler clarifiers. The sludge pockets are there. So, and you can see in this picture, you can see we can check the sludge level from the sludge judge. And you can see highly clarified water that is being discharged to the Manik River. So that is our second type of treatment strategy for lands available, moderate land availability. And in case where we don't have a lot of land, as the treatment plants built close to the residential areas, we go for activated sludge extended aeration with fine bubble aeration. You can see the newly commissioned treatment plant in the picture in Kandy City in Gatambe area, and the treated effluent is just discharged to the Valley River, and what we adopt there is submerged propeller with fine bubble aeration, so that will not produce any aerosols, and also with the submerged propeller we can control the oxygen to create anoxic conditions to improve the denitrification. And this is being discharged, and 3 kilometers downstream, we have the major water intakes downstream as well. So then sludge treatment strategy that we are adopting in the water board is if there is low precipitation, dry zone areas, we go for conventional sludge drying beds. And in some cases, we go with polycarbonate roof to prevent the sludge being, swell due to rainwater interference. And in densely populated areas, we go for bell filter press or screw press dehydrators, and followed by solar dry beds where the pathogens are deactivated and the dry solid content after mechanical dewatering is around 20%, and it can be increased 40% to 70-80% depending on the input in the solar dryer, and then it will the dry pellets more or less sent to co-composting purpose, so that is our strategy for the sludge. And also for the treated effluent, we rather than discharging the highly clarified water to the sea, we can go for reuse options for the industry or non-potable users. And here you can see the Palavat plant there. They are the maturation ponds you can see on the picture, and that being used for the landscape irrigation. So and also for the strategy for the effluent disposal, we have EIA approved for the Jaffna City sewerage project. Rather, the treatment plant is close to the sea, but we will be pumping 4.5 kilometers upstream to the agricultural land, especially for paddy cultivation and for the agricultural use. So for this one, the EIA is approved. And similarly, Hambantota, we have got the EIA clearance for the reuse. Hambantota is rather than discharging to the sea, we have taken it inland because Jaffna and Hambantota having water stress cities, dry zone areas, so people can reuse that water for agriculture. Rather than discharging to the sea will create public social inacceptance because of the most of the salt is being produced in the southern coast in Hambantota area. And finally, what I want to highlight is the about the industrial siting policy that we adopt. There is a cabinet decision by the Water Supply Ministry and the Ministry of Environment joint cabinet paper, where siting of high polluting industries are type A high polluting industries are discouraged locating upstream of the drinking water intakes. That will safeguard the micropollutants that are not being removed in the biological treatment. So that has to be removed by the appropriate industry specific pre-treatment. So these are the type A industries under industrial siting policy. You can just see some of the industries. And so by doing wastewater treatment, basically we are increasing the life expectancy of the population and safeguard the against environmental pollution, and also encourage ecotourism. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Danish. It was very informative and you exposed many insights. So it was very informative and interesting. So I would like to invite the next speaker, Mr. Kamal Dharanayakar. Mr. Kamal is currently serving as a senior project officer, urban and water supply sanitation, Sri Lanka Resident Mission in Asian Development Bank. Mr. Kamal is a civil engineer specialized in water and sanitation development. He is the focal person at ADB Sri Lanka Resident Mission for urban, water and sanitation sectors. He has involved in processing and implementation of several water supply and sewerage projects in Sri Lanka. So I would like to invite Mr. Kamal. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Indrajit. Can you see the presentation?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Okay, thanks for the kind introduction, and thanks IWA for inviting for this webinar. And I'll start my presentation just to do a brief introduction what I'm going to say here. Basically, I'll cover what is the Asian Development Bank strategy in developing countries to make investment, and also the investment status in Sri Lanka at present by the Asian Development Bank, and also how we prioritize investments in a country, and also some lessons from completed projects from Sri Lanka. Now, ADB, all projects in our member countries, we follow ADB strategy 2030 for consideration for implementation. There are 8 key operational priorities in our strategy. If you go through it, you can see most of them are more or less relevant to water supply and sanitation development. For an example, the number 1, addressing remaining poverty and reducing inequalities, and the accelerating progress in gender equality is very much relevant to water supply and sanitation improvement. Also, number 4, making cities more livable is highly related, and I think most of our discussions today focus on those areas. And also promoting rural development, and also strengthening governance and institutional capacity. So ADB target is to improve the sustainable development of Asia and Pacific through these operational priorities. When it's come to Sri Lanka, at present, our total investment is around $4 billion for the ongoing projects. And we are working in water supply and sanitation sector for more than 3 decades now, and have completed 5 projects benefiting more than 3 million people. And there are 4 projects ongoing, 2 with the National Water Supply and Drainage Board, and 1 with the Colombo Municipal Council, and 1 with the local government ministry, that's again to provide water to CKD affected areas. So altogether, at present, we have an investment of 650 million in Sri Lanka in the water and sanitation sector. If you see the pie chart here, you can see the major portion of our investment goes to transport, but water remain a top priority with 17% at present. That means one of the key sector we are investing in Sri Lanka. But you can see we are working in transport, energy, irrigation sectors, education, health, and finance. So different sectors are there that we are investing. So when it's come to priority of water supply, there are factors to be considered. I think this is very important as water sector professionals here. Even though water supply and sanitation is top priority in our agenda as far as water sector professional, our investment priority will govern by government policy framework and their investment priority. Definitely water is the government priority as well, but the government has number of priorities to consider when deciding investment in water sector. Also, before any investment, ADB operational priorities also will be considered, the one I explained earlier. So any investment should be in line with that. And on top of that, when we decide an investment, we review the sector performance, institutional capacity, and the sustainability of assets created recently, so that we can assure that any investment in that particular sector will be effectively utilized by the communities. And if there are projects ongoing in the same sector, we assess the performance of this ongoing investment, whether it is effectively utilized and implementation is happening smoothly. In that case, ADB is more willing to provide additional funds to that sector. As this webinar is a little bit focused more on sanitation and hygiene also, I wanted to discuss a little bit on hygiene and sanitation intervention by ADB also. Generally, we provide, our assessment is once we provide water supply services to the community, their sanitation and hygiene practices also have a positive impact, because without water services, it's difficult to maintain proper hygiene condition. So, and also ADB generally target large scale projects. For a country like Sri Lanka, at least 50 million US dollar projects we are considering. So in that situation, most of the investment going for water, and sanitation and hygiene also will be part of it. And as sanitation and hygiene is a crucial area, sometimes not considered as a priority as water. So because of that, ADB, they have some grant funds from some donor countries and trust funds to provide more support to sanitation and hygiene improvement. Generally, these funds are within the range of 1 to 2 million US dollars, but we can effectively use with the water supply project to improve the sanitation and hygiene situation. And also when we design a project, we prepare a design and monitoring framework which monitor the outcome and impact of that project. So at the end of the project, we will review the DMF situation and see whether real impact is achieved by the project. Generally in designs, we include sanitation and gender indicators also to ensure that these sanitation and hygiene components also addressed properly while we are implementing water supply projects in a country. So finally, I wanted to share with you some experience we had recently with a recently completed dry zone water supply and sanitation project, which was implemented with the support of National Water Supply and Drainage Board. This dry zone water project, ADB provided 125 million US dollars for the project, and the main target was to provide water and sanitation services to 4 towns, namely Chilau, Vaunia, Mana, and Putlam. Those towns were selected as they are in the dry zone, as well as affected by the conflict we had earlier. Just after the conflict is over, we started this project. So there were few significant achievements in this project I would like to share with you. One of it is we developed a dedicated water reservoir for drinking water in Vaunia. This is important because I think in previous presentations also, Mr. Jaivir also mentioned this depleting water resources, water sharing is a big issue now with the pollution as well. So this water reservoir is the first that kind of large scale water reservoir constructed recently by the water board, because this reservoir will be utilized only for drinking water purposes. So the water board can rely on this water reservoir for future few decades for Vaunia. And also the treatment plant in Vaunia was undertaken by a local contractor. To our knowledge, I think that is the largest water treatment plant constructed by a local contractor, 12,000 meter cube per day plant. And also we had a very comprehensive environmental action plan, because there were some endangered species found in the inundation area. So we had a very comprehensive relocation program for endangered species to new habitat. And eventual studies after completion of the process found that that process was very successful. And another one is improved public toilet facilities. That means in these 4 towns, we constructed around 20 new public toilets in near bus stands and some marketplaces. So the project adopted a bit of innovative idea of designing very attractive toilets, not just toilet blocks, but with the support of an architect, design an attractive building, and also provided bathing facilities, because a lot of transit passengers are coming to some of these towns. So and for the differently able people, all the facilities, everything is there. So that toilets are functioning quite well now. So that's a good improvement in public toilet construction. Of course, we constructed septic treatment plants also to all 4 towns, but some are working well, others are not working that well, because these are maintained by the local authorities. So I think in the future, we have to think of a more sustainable way of maintaining septic treatment facilities, because I think water board will not maintain it, even though they were responsible for design and construction. So that is the area to be considered in the future. I have just added few photographs. The first one, this reservoir is the Vaunia reservoir constructed under the project by water board. You can see in forest area, so a lot of resettlement and these environmental aspects are there, but it was successfully completed and assured good water for Vaunia area. I think with this, because there is not much good water resources available in this area. So this is a very good kind of model that I think water board will replicate in other regions as well. And the other photograph is the treatment plant constructed by a local contractor. It's fairly large treatment plant operating very well now. And I have added a photo of that kind of public toilet just after construction. You can see it is not just a typical toilet, but have better features in this toilet. And the translocation program for animals, it was done day and night, and very careful process. We are developing a kind of knowledge product also based on that, because this is one of the first attempt in Sri Lanka to have a comprehensive translocation program for to a new habitat. So with that, thanks for your attention. I conclude my presentation with that. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Mr. Kamal. It was very nice and it was very insightful. So I would like to thank you for your presentation and your speech. So next, we'll move to the Q&A session. So this session allows you to discuss on the questions and suggestions of you, providing a greater platform for fruitful discussion. I kindly invite Professor Mahesh Jaivira to conduct the session along with a concluding discussion of today's session. So first, let me introduce Professor Mahesh Jaivira. Professor Mahesh is a senior lecturer of Department of Civil Engineering, and he obtained his bachelor's in civil engineering from University of Moratuwa with a first-class honors. And he obtained his PhD in ecological engineering from Saitama University in Japan. So he has published extensively in index journals, conferences, and he served as a consultant in many local and international projects. So he's a chartered engineer, and Professor Mahesh is a committee member of International Water Association Sri Lanka. So also he's a member of the SLAS, Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, Section C. So I would like to invite Professor for conducting the session. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Indrajit. I do believe that everybody hears me, and how I'm going to do is I'm going to just pose two questions to each and every panelist, because I have selected a couple of questions. First, the questions is to Engineer Ananda. Ananda, you mentioned about the importance of the WASH program, that is the water, sanitation and hygiene. And in my opinion, you have mentioned quite a lot on water and sanitation, but very little on hygiene. My question is for you, is that when it comes to the estate population and school children, are there any instrumentations or maybe some, let's say some policies or any other interventions that are very important to improve the hygienic conditions or maybe hygienic etiquettes of these two sectors?
Yeah, in fact, with interventions in education sector, there are a number of projects now ongoing to implement sanitation and hygiene programs, including hand washing facilities, inclusive hand washing facilities, and including MHM, menstrual hygiene management software and hardware. So there is a project supported by EU, which is actually the concept of the project is reaching the unreached. So we have to reach the people who are not served by any agency or government. So as in now they are really enjoying the sanitation facilities as well as hand washing facilities in these hard to reach areas, in the schools.
Okay, thank you very much. And I do believe that they will be implemented in future so that the hygienic conditions would be improved. So therefore the health issues would be also improved in future. So my second question is actually for the water safety plans. Yeah. And you mentioned that the water safety plans are quite important. And though you say that the water safety plans are important, we could say that there are quite a lot of development plans are going on, activities are going on in these catchment areas. And that would impair the quality of these catchment areas. We know, basically, that we depend on quite a lot of, these catchment areas. So do we have any legal instruments to stop such development or haphazard development being taken place? Or what can we be able to do to stop such events happening in Sri Lanka?
In fact, the water safety plan is an instrument introduced to assess risk from the catchment to the consumer.
Yeah.
So it is now the catchment is incorporated, and the influence of the service provider is extended to the limits of the water management area. Now every treatment plant has a water management area, which includes the resource development in catchment. So I think we need to have a legal framework, not that enacted, to implement that part of the water safety plan. So now the service provider has to depend on the local administration to protect the catchments.
Okay, so in your opinion, what you say is it a must for you to have this water safety plans for each and every catchment in Sri Lanka?
Yes, definitely, because
Definitely,
now you can see the best example is
Okay.
Nabugama Kalatua.
Okay.
That is the best example for sustainable development because
Okay.
the catchment is protected by a water board. Nobody can go there. It is entirely prohibited encroaching or.
Right. Okay, so thank you, Anand, for your valuable comments. And I would like to move to next Ms. Kusum Matukorala. And Kusum, thank you very much for your insights that you have given. And I know that you have been, very much involved in this community level. And my question is for you on this dry toilets. What about your perception on this dry toilets, particularly for the introduction to school children in areas where the water is scarce? What can you say about that?
Well, hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I had two places that I've seen dry toilets in Sri Lanka was in Matale and in somewhere near Ratmalan, I think. Forget the name. But one was an urban sector and it was not very, because I think people didn't understand the concept. So in fact, even they had opened the tank and, taken out the rocks because they said, what are all these rocks doing here? Now in the Matale toilet, in some of the villages that I visited, they said that yes, the family is the family is good in using it, but when visitors come, we have a problem because they are not used to the entire concept. And in fact, here I'd like to mention something that the Director General, the then Director General of IMI said. He said, when you go to the toilet, do you know exactly what you want to do?
Yes.
So I think that it would be difficult. Maybe you could have urinals separately for schools, but the concept of dry toilets, even in places like, for instance, someone might think of estates, there might be an issue because we should again go into sanitation from a socio-cultural angle. Hello? Yeah, and ablutions is absolutely important for Asian cultures. So I think that is rather difficult to manage. But I think I've heard of a good example of dry toilets being used in the Eastern Province. I think it was set up by Oxfam or somewhere, but there was space and the community somehow or other didn't mind using it for fertilizer. So schools, I think you will have a problem. Hello?
We can't hear you, Mahesh.
Sorry, something has happened. Okay, so next question is with regards to the estate population. Now, what would be the best method of improving the sanitation practices as opposed to this open defecation? Because we have been, seeing quite a lot of, open defecation still taking place in estate population, even though we try hard to improve this sanitation practices. I think you're the right person to, just help us, get some idea as to how we should improve the sanitation practices, particularly in estate population. Kusum, over to you. Kusum, can you hear? Hello?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, sanitation, I think, is one of these areas related to water, like gender, where there is not enough research done. And the research is not done in the socio-cultural issues. Now, I mean, going out of our country, let me sort of give this one example of Tanzania, where, a project which started giving the toilets did not understand that one of the deepest insults in the Swahili language is, I shit on your shit. So basically, when you give a toilet, that is what happens. So, we have issues of, does the daughter-in-law and the father-in-law use the same toilet in one place? There are these cultural norms which we do not know because we simply do not want to invest time and energy in studying it. So I think that one problem is that we find that the toilets go out of disuse very fast because of the lack of water.
Yeah.
Now, if you keep on, making a toilet because, you have got a contract to build 20 toilets or whatever it is, and you do not look after the catchment so that you have adequate water supply, that is going to be a problem. And in the estate sector, we have to understand, we are talking about the most marginalized people in Sri Lanka. So they have been marginalized for a long time, and they have been not having these certain facilities. So one has to create a different thinking. And for us, for Sri Lanka Water Partnership, for Netwater and YWC and the organizations which work with us, the catalyst for change, especially for sanitation, is children and women.
Yeah, correct. Thank you very much, Kusum. The next question goes to Dr. Shiromi. Dr. Shiromi, you were talking of inclusive sanitation and inclusive infrastructure. People would like to, know, is it a must to have inclusive infrastructure for public and as well as private buildings as of today?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Legally approved, or say, supposing if it is not present, can we be able to, just take legal action?
Now, you want to ask whether the national policies have been extended so that the legal action can be taken if they are not complying?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I don't think that I can answer that question. Maybe can we direct that question to our first panelist? Maybe he might be more knowledgeable in that.
Say, for example, what I say is now, whenever the donor agencies coming out, let's say for the ADB, so when there is an ADB funded project, of course, we have been, giving inclusive infrastructure. So that is a must. But when it comes to, let's say, a government building, sometimes we might not find inclusive sanitation, these features in that building. Is it a requirement, by law, or isn't not a requirement by law? That is
okay, right. Yeah, I can answer it this way. Now, for example, when you complete a building, and if you do not have the inclusive sanitation considerations, especially for those who are having different abilities, you will not be able to get the COC. So that far we have gone, but I'm not quite sure whether all the legal aspects indicated in the national policy are in an action.
I see. Okay. Now, when it comes to schools, what are your views? Now, say, for example, some of the schools, even it's going to be very difficult for you to, find, the adequate number of, toilets. So in such a case, I don't know whether, are you considering all toilets, particularly in schools, to be inclusive features? Or how do you reckon this, the sanitation or maybe the toilets in schools? Are they inclusive or are they not inclusive? What about you?
Yeah, right now, as some of the panelists say, when you get a project, then you are very enthusiastic and provide the facilities with all the inclusive features, most of them. But when it comes to practice and usage, then because of the lack of maintenance and mostly lack of understanding of how to use them. Based on my experience when I was traveling around the country to see these some of these facilities, that is the main challenge, the usage, lack of awareness, and most importantly, as Ms. Kusum said, the lack of water availability. This becomes non-usable, but I'm sure most of these inclusive features, including safe disposal, is happen to can be found. Yeah.
Okay, right. So I think there is a request for you. It is important for you to, come out with a code of practice as early as possible, so that most of these engineers could be able to practice, because when it comes to the inclusive, infrastructure, particularly sanitation, let's say the toilets, the people or the engineers do not have much knowledge, as to how to provide them. So therefore, I mean, maybe with the assistance of the water board, if you can, come out with this code of practice at least, that would help quite a lot. Challenge.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, in fact, we have initiated this some time back, but it could not get completed. It was started initially because we started for preschools and we were able to do it with certain success. Okay. And other sectors should also be included. That was the understanding.
Thank you, Shirumi. Anand wants to add a little bit on that.
In fact, this inclusive sanitation facilities, actually guidelines were issued by UNICEF and the Ministry of in the National Sanitation Policy is mentioned there. So now the current situation is that it has to be a must for any development, but there is no legal framework to take legal action against anybody who has not provided these facilities. But it is a accepted norm now to provide. In schools, of course, we provide inclusive facilities for all the ages, as well as for children, MHM facilities.
Thank you, Anand, and thank you, Shirumi. And the next to the engineer Danesh. Danesh, we have been, Sri Lanka is quite good in, giving solutions to, particularly for this wastewater, using what you call this long sea outfalls without any treatment. We are very good at that because we have been having in Colombo, quite a lot of long sea outfalls, and there are quite a lot new long sea outfalls also to come in. But when you look at the world's perspective, now this particular system is thrown out, or I would say it is not taken up by the other countries. What about your idea? Why we are going ahead with this still?
I can give some examples now. For example, to explain that NWSDB do not have any long sea outfalls in operation at the moment. So all we have is full treatment. And since we do not have a flowing water body, for example, Ratmananamurutua, we are discharging short sea outfall. And in future also we might do reuse options. But at the moment, in the Colombo Municipal Council area, we have two sea outfalls in the northern and the southern catchment, which is having only treatment as screening and grit removal. So that doesn't remove any organic matter or ammonium. So, principally, water board is thinking differently at the moment. We think that now the water resources are depleting, and due to climate change, when we want to extract adequate water, sometimes it's difficult. So by doing treatment, we can replenish the water bodies, rivers and lakes, and also use treated effluent for agriculture or non-potable use. So that is one aspect of it. Then the other thing is support. Then the launching sea outfalls create a lot of problems. One aspect. That is, when we construct a groin, always there will be accumulation in one side and the erosion on the other side, and also fisherman compensation. So during launching will be a very big issue. Then the other thing is microplastic issue. As you probably know that microplastic contain even toothpaste, all the creams, hair gels, so many things. And by doing biological wastewater treatment, secondary treatment, we can remove them 85% through the biological treatment. So that also is a big point that we need to consider for the treatment rather than against outfall. And the algal blooms, because we are not removing nutrients, the organic matter, so that creates a lot of algal blooms in the sea. And recently also it has been recorded throughout the southern coastal belt. There were huge algal blooms in this area. Then other issue is antibacterial resistance, development of antibacterial resistance bacteria. By carrying out biological treatment, it is found that more than 85% of that also being removed with the biological treatment. Then other is we keep all options open for the future by treatment, because in future we don't have adequate water. So therefore, we need, by implementing long sea outfalls without treatment, it's very difficult. One thing is, particularly in Sri Lanka, it's very difficult for us to find land. If you acquire the lands now, then we can do the treatment in the future. So that is very important. So then it supports tourism also, because any tourist, if they want to come to Sri Lanka, if we have treatment, then there will be a psychological effect for them to choose Sri Lanka against another country. And also MIPA, Marine Environmental Protection Agency, they are very much keen to achieve the blue flag beach criteria. So, so other agencies, development programs also, we have to think. So therefore, irrespective of, being sustainable in recovering the treatment cost through tariff, we think if we are implementing a project, we should go for treatment. So that is the, that has been decided at the National Steering Committee, chaired by the Secretary of the Water Supply in Nigambo feasibility. We should go with treatment rather than long sea outfalls. So most of the water supply, wastewater disposal project we are implementing by the water board will have treatment in the future.
So what does it mean is basically in the future we may not be able to see long sea outfalls.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, so next question is to you. Now you know that we are very good in coming up with central systems, particularly for sanitation, wastewater treatment systems. But we have our reservation for the DWAT systems, because there are quite a lot of areas in Sri Lanka where we cannot go for central systems. Why Sri Lanka is not good at, going for DWAT systems? What about your idea about it? Because you mentioned quite a lot of, centralized systems, but we have had very little, examples coming from Sri Lanka on DWAT systems. Why? What is the reason behind that?
The reason, even For example, in water board, we were not very much keen on a decentralized system in the past. But now I have mentioned how we are planning to cover the cities in future. So it is a blend of on-site, septage, decentralized, and centralized, only for the densely area. So in future, we will see more of decentralized wastewater treatment systems. That is what I can say. But still, we have true decentralized systems operated by water board, and there are some implemented under GPOB also operated by water board. So therefore, in future, we might see very often decentralized is being considered.
Thank you, Danish. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next the questions goes to the engineer Kamal from ADB. Kamal, we have seen that the ADB is funding quite a lot of projects for water, but it's a little difficult in getting some, the case studies for the sanitation. And what is your policy in investing for water than the sanitation in Sri Lanka? Are there any sort of, instruments that you have in deciding investing the water than the sanitation? What about your opinion?
Professor Mahesh, no, I think there is no policy as such just to invest in water. It comes, as I explained in my presentation, the factors, main factor is the government demand. So we generally discuss with the government the pipeline for next 3 years. This is happening every year. So it's a priority. If it's come from the government, the water supply, generally that follows our investment. But there is no policy as such, and at the moment I think in Sri Lanka we are mainly concentrate on urban water supplies, and there are different donor agencies concentrating on different areas like sewerage systems and rural water supply, that way. So that is kind of arrangement here with the government, but there is no policy as such. If there is a demand, if there is a request, we can go ahead with sanitation or sewerage projects as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Kamal, what you say is actually still there is no priority for the sanitation project, but you get a lot of priorities for the water projects. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, because for an example, Jaffna, now we designed the project for water supply and sanitation, including the sewerage project that Mr. Danesh presented today. But unfortunately, there was a delay in water supply provision, and also without water, we can't go for sewerage projects. First, we have to provide water. So I think that is another factor we are considering. Once water supply coverage is done, probably more priority will come for sewerage projects, because the investment also very high. But I know that with the time, the investment cost will be even larger than now. But unfortunately, water is the top priority at this stage, because we have to provide safe water first. Then, of course, sanitation means sewerage projects. But sanitation, of course, we have to have, and in our projects also we have sanitation components. As I explained, in dry zone project, we have septic treatment facilities, and even rural sanitation program we had. So we have a sanitation program, but major investment is in water at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Kamal. There is another small question. Now, when you invest from the ADB, so one of the key areas that you look at is the asset management. Now, when it comes to the asset management, we being, the Sri Lankans were quite, poor in asset management in the long run. So therefore, there are a lot of issues in sustainability of asset management. Now, how do you, the ADB, help the agencies to improve the asset management? What are the instruments you would basically propose in improving the asset management?
Asset management is generally a part of our implementation program. For an example, now in Colombo, we are supporting the water board to improve the water, reduce the water losses. So that means because it is in a way we have to manage the assets because a lot of assets are there. And also that is again a factor like with the water board, we are working a lot because generally water board management, operation and maintenance is very successful, and asset management at a satisfactory level. They can improve it further. We are supporting through different devices, but generally water supply that's is okay. But when it's come to sanitation, we have big problem of asset management. That's what I slightly indicated in my presentation also, because now present policies, local authorities should maintain septic facilities, that kind of thing. So that there is a issue. So it's an institutional issue which has to be corrected, and we provide our full support. But government should take the lead on that matter.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much, Kamal. Okay, so that concludes this question and answer time. And then I would like to pass it to Indrajit.
So it was very interesting, and I guess it was a very fruitful discussion that we had. So thank you very much, Professor Mahesh, and all the panelists for the interesting presentations and the fruitful discussion. So it was amazing. So with that, we have come to the end of the session. So I would like to invite Professor Kala again we would like to have your thoughts how session and so yeah, Professor.
Yeah, can you hear me, Indrajit?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, I'd just like to thank all the speakers and the chairs and the panel for really a very wonderful session today. I was paying attention to most of the sessions. I had to leave sort of in and out, but I did find most of the discussions really, really interesting, and I think very poignant and very relevant to the situation that Sri Lanka is facing. I'm really, really proud. I mean, being a Sri Lankan myself, I'm very proud that we had some fantastic speakers who gave some very thoughtful, thought-provoking presentations. I thought the panel discussion was excellent. I think that Professor Ananda's presentation, where he was really reflecting on the SDG 6 goals and some of the water stress situations that the country is facing and some of the potential solutions that could be adopted, I think were really, really very interesting. And then of course Kusum and Dr. Shiromi's discussions around the need for standards for sanitation and safe disposal of excreta, so that we, so it moves away from a sort of a hit and miss approach to something which is more directed and purposeful, I think is really, really important. It's something that the IWA is championing through particularly its non-sewage sanitation specialist group. And then from the ADB, Kamal Dahanayaka, I think mentioned some really troubling issues around the operational maintenance of septage treatment systems and the need for more clearer guidance to manage them. And this is something that a lot of people are working on, and it is a very difficult problem to solve, primarily because septage itself, the characteristics of it is so variable. And the variability of the concentrations make huge differences to the outcomes of any designs that you're planning. But of course, there are serious problems with the operation and maintenance of these systems. I was fascinated with Danesh's presentation. Danesh was one of my ex-students, so I'm very happy to hear the great work that he's been doing through NWSD, through the National Water Board, in terms of wastewater treatment, and how the Water Board has been able to be very nimble and adaptive in terms of the types of solutions that it adopts for different areas. I mean, the example from Kandy, where they're using fine bubble aeration and submerged propellers to reduce the production of aerosols, etc., I think was really fascinating. And then, the things that he talked around with agricultural use in places like Hambantota and also my own hometown of Jaffna, I think, the positivities around reuse was really very refreshing to hear. And of course the panel discussion was fantastic. So all in all, I think today has been a really, really good session. And so I would like to congratulate all the presenters. As I said, the chair of the panel discussion, Ms. Mahesh, I thought was fantastic. Of course, Indrajit for chairing and facilitating such a wonderful webinar. And it was great to see so many people stay online for the entire duration. So from an IWA perspective, I will say that this has been a very successful webinar. As I said, I'm very proud because it's being held in my home country. And so with that, I would like to wish you all well. And, I hope that this is just the first of many. And I would encourage you to do more. And of course, the Secretariat here in London are always here to help you in any way that we can in order to facilitate this type of knowledge exchange and sharing that I think in the long term really helps the country to develop in a way that's sustainable and takes it onto a new trajectory in terms of water and sanitation. So thank you. Back to you, Indrajit.
Thank you so much, Professor Kala. And just one reminder, actually. So with this limited time, we actually couldn't answer all the questions that you raised. So we can, of course, after the session, we can take all the questions and answer it separately. And of course, after the session also, you can raise your question to the email address I have put in the chat box. So it is open. So thank you very much, Professor Kala, for gracing today's session and for your kind support for us and your contribution to the international water sector. So we from the IWA Sri Lanka wish you all the very best. So, and next, I would like to extend my gratitude towards Professor Jayavira and all the panelists for your amazing contribution for the success of today's session. So, I thank you, the Water Forum of Institute of Engineers Sri Lanka and the Sri Lanka Association for the Advancement of Science, Dr. Kamal Laksari and Dr. Shirami. Last but not least, thank you very much, Dr. Buddhika Gunawardena and Professor Mahesh Jayavira for all the support you extended towards IWA Sri Lanka Secretariat in organizing the session. And thank you, everyone. And we would be grateful to hear your comments on today's session and any suggestions that you would like to extend towards us. Please forward them to maybe my email, and also you can go to the IWA Connect and you can send your comments, and also you can go to the IWA Sri Lanka Facebook page and you can connect with us. So hope you all enjoyed and had a fruitful session today, and we will hope to meet you in our next session. So until then, you take care. So thank you very much. Great day ahead, everyone. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Take good care. Bye.